Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls of all ages. Here we are again, Sunday night. It's August 9th, 2026. I'm Michael C. Hardy. Welcome to my library. Hope everybody is doing really well, having a great week. It's been a interesting time here in Western North Carolina. Um, we spent yesterday at the Samuel Doak House now on the campus of Tusculum University. Had an awesome time, fielded a ton of questions, sold a bunch of books. If you came out, thank you so much for coming by my table and visiting with me. It was just a awesome experience. A little warm. Thought we about got struck by lightning at one point. There was a serious um, crack and boom, and it was really close by, but that's okay. I had a great time um, out just chatting history. And of course, a few days before that, I was in Yadkinville, North Carolina. Once again, great day out chatting history. And looking forward to chatting with some of y'all here this evening. As usual, drop me a note in the box. Let me know where you are watching or listening from this evening. Um, but yeah, hanging out here in the library. Upcoming events will be at the Holston Heritage Museum in Bluff City, Tennessee, tomorrow at 5 o'clock. I will be speaking to the SCV camp in Asheville, North Carolina on the 20th of August, the Kingsport, Tennessee SCV camp on August 25th, and the SCV camp, on August 22nd at the Longstreet Museum, also in Tennessee. So I am going to spend a lot of the rest of the month in the great state of Tennessee, where I was yesterday. Doesn't always work out that way. Of course, I go to North Carolina and I go to South Carolina and Virginia and other places. But if I'm going to be out and about in your neighborhood, I encourage you to come out and join this crazy history conversation that we have on a regular basis. Good evening to my friend Robert in Arizona, Al in Tennessee, Bobby Joe Goodson in Arkansas, Jason Boshiers in Tennessee, David Pope in Tennessee, TJ in Tennessee, the Tennessee evening. Actually, we're going to be talking a little Tennessee history tonight as well as we jump into it. Hey, there's somebody from North Carolina. Niels, hope you're doing well. We're outnumbered this evening, so we need a few more North Carolina people to pop in and say hi. Um, but let's jump into it here. I don't have a good title for this yet, but we're going to develop one before we post it and make it go live on the blog. Looking for the Confederate War. Now, I posted last week that the blog now has 3 million hits. I know a lot of blogs have gone away. I know some blogs have bazillions of hits, but for my little corner of the internet world, 3 million hits is pretty awesome. And some folks will say, well, a lot of that is just AI scraping. And that may be true, but I'm influencing the algorithm. So just think about that as we go that. But yeah, the blog hit 3 million hits, little aspects of history. Mostly dealing with the 1860s, where we are going to be for the next few minutes. A lot of times when we talk about the 1860s, we talk about brother versus brother or family versus family, and that's very true. And if you go check out the blog looking for the Confederate War, you will find tons of examples of that. Whether it's the Gibbon brothers or the Flusser family, or there's a cemetery. I don't know if this has ever wound up on the blog, but there's a cemetery in a nearby county where there is literally a brother who served in one army and a brother who served in the other army buried side by side, but there's a tree growing in between them. That's really cool. That probably is something I should blog about too. But maybe we'll get there one day. We're doing a little better about blogging right now. Things have almost slowed down. I will also say this before we jump right into this, actually, even though I've already jumped into it. I got 2 Savas Beatty updates this week for, and it needs to be done. This evening, we're talking about Carter County, specifically Elizabethton. It's divided just like many other places. We don't know how divided it really was. Maybe someday somebody will do the research and prove that. One of the interesting things I found, especially when I was working on my book, Kirk Civil War Raids Along the Blue Ridge, which has a ton of East Tennessee stuff in it, there was a description in a newspaper in January of 1862, and this is talking about something that had happened back in 1861. But according to the correspondent, a quote Unionist in Elizabethton said that no Southern flag should be raised in town or taken through it. Not long afterwards, however, Mrs. Mary C. Carpenter procured a flag bearing the emblem of our native South. She got into her buggy and drove through the town. And I have been told she drove all around the town with the Southern flag waving gloriously. The Unionists failed to execute their threats in regard to shooting the flag to pieces. And so there are a lot of other debates and things that take place in Carter County in the war. And I have written several things about Carter County over the years on the blog, and I'll probably have links to some of those other articles when I get this one posted. But we're talking this evening about two particular families, and this has a very important story that you're going to be able to help with here in a few minutes. Samuel P. Carter was born in Elizabethton in 1819. He's the eldest son of Alfred M. Carter. He attended Duffield Academy there in Elizabethton. He goes to Washington College in Limestone, Princeton University, enlists in the U.S. Navy, does a tour in the U.S. Navy before he is sent to the United States Naval Academy and graduates in 1846. Saw service on board of the USS Ohio at the Battle of Veracruz during the Mexican-American War. Various assignments after that, including stints at the United States Naval Observatory, assistant professor of mathematics at the Naval Academy, tours in the Pacific, along the coast of Brazil, in China. I mean, he is literally all over the place. At the very beginning of the war, at the request of United States Senator Andrew Johnson, Carter was detached from the Navy and was sent to work on recruiting East Tennessee Unionists. He was commissioned a brigadier general at the request of Abraham Lincoln, becoming the only man to hold both naval and army commissions during the war. At least that's what I've read. Carter went on to lead his brigade. He's a part of the bridge burning episodes that we've talked about before. He leads a brigade at the Battle of Mill Springs, Kentucky, helps capture Cumberland Gap in October of 62. Led a raid in East Tennessee against the railroad in December of 62, fought at the Battle of Blue Springs while commanding cavalry, fights at the Battle of Wise Fork, North Carolina in 1865. He will end the war as a brevet major general of volunteers and as a commander in the United States Navy. After the war, Carter returns to the Navy, finally retiring in August of 1881. He is on the retired list, is promoted to Rear Admiral, passes away in 1891, and is buried at Oak Hill Cemetery in Washington, D.C. The house that he grew up in, that his dad built, still stands in Elizabethton, Tennessee, Carter County. Pause. Next story, October 4th, 1831. Henderson M. Folsom was born in Elizabethton, Tennessee, probably. I did find one source that said that he was born in Greene County, Tennessee, but more sources are saying he's born in Elizabethton. In the 1860 census, he's listed as a clerk, young family, living with him. When the war came, Folsom joined the 2nd Tennessee Cavalry, Ashby's Cavalry, where he was mustered in as a private. In October of 1862, he appears in the records as a clerk to Brigadier General Alfred E. Jackson. And Jackson has come up twice in the past 2 weeks. Maybe we need to dig a little bit more into his life. A few months later, Folsom is reported as being appointed a major and assistant commissary for Jackson's brigade. And in December of 1863, he is chief quartermaster for Jackson's brigade. During Early's Valley campaign, Shenandoah Valley campaign, Folsom is listed as serving on the staff of Major General John B. Gordon, and then as commissary of substance. He's in Brigadier General Gabriel S. Wharton's brigade. On an unknown date, at least by January, maybe before January of 1865, Major Folsom was appointed commissary of substance for Thomas's Legion. Second time that's come up in 2 weeks. In his application for presidential pardon, written on June 14, 1865 from Elizabethton, Folsom informs the president that, quote, he was an original Unionist, like a lot of Southerners were, and as such, this is Folsom's writing, cast the whole weight of whatever influence he possessed in his vote against every proposition looking for a chance of continuing relations, which existed between the Tennessee and the federal government. However, when the vote was cast, Folsom believed that it was his duty to side with, quote, the overwhelming voice of the people, and thereby became identified with the rebellion. He served 3 years as a quartermaster. Now, Folsom had to apply directly to the president because there was a charge of treason against him in the federal court in Knoxville. And somebody needs to do some research and writing on all of these Confederates in Tennessee that were charged with treason after the war. For character witnesses, that's why he had to apply for a presidential pardon, because usually a major who was a staff officer for the war, he doesn't have to apply for a presidential pardon, but Folsom had to. But for character witnesses, Folsom recommended Colonel Thomas Miller of the 13th Tennessee Cavalry U.S. 5 officers, including Colonel Miller from the 13th Tennessee Cavalry, signed a supporting letter along with 7 sentences for Folsom's application for presidential pardon. Folsom was pardoned in November of 1865 and commenced to study law. Sometime between 1865 and 1868, he is licensed to practice law. I found an ad in a Bristol newspaper in 1868, August of 68, where he is advertising his services as a lawyer. At the time of his death in 1908, Folsom was considered one of the leading lawyers in the state of Tennessee. He is buried at the Highland Cemetery in Carter County, Tennessee. Folsom built his house about 1860, 1861, across the street from the house that Samuel P. Carter was born in. Is there any other place that has the house of a Union officer and a Confederate officer across the street from each other? If you know of one, drop it in the comments. As of 2026, both houses survive. The Carter home has been used as a restaurant for a number of years. The Folsom home was county offices for many years, but was damaged during the hurricane in 2024. There are a few local government officials who want to demolish the Folsom house. In fact, in Carter County and in Elizabethton, this is a huge ongoing debate right now. The Folsom House would make a great county museum and archives. And you could say, Michael, it was damaged in the storm. It survived from 1861 to 2024 without any real storm damage. It was just like the storm of a lifetime that flooded a little bit of the house. I know people that have been in the house and they say that it's actually in pretty good shape, but they want to tear it down and put in what? A parking lot. Um, Hopefully, the Folsom House would make a great county museum, would make a great archives. Hopefully, the house can be stabilized and restored before it is too far gone. It is really not in that bad of shape, even with the storm damage. But as you know, and I know, a lot of times the powers to be will drag their feet in the process. So when they finally get around to it, it will be too far gone to save, and they will tear it down. Now there have been a lot of there have been a couple county meetings. The county voted to demolish the house, and the county officials or the county officials were told you can't do that because it is a historical house. Has to be a survey done on the house, and that is the process. We need to help Carter County people out and contact Carter County officials. We're going to maybe even come up with a petition soon to save the Folsom House, because I think it is pretty unique about there being the house of a Union officer and a Confederate officer that are across the street from each other. And when I get this posted tomorrow, there'll be photographs of how close those houses are to each other. Just an interesting little piece of history. That's why y'all come to me, is because I've got this, what would you say, Elizabeth, minutia?
Yeah.
We should name this history minutia because it is these little pieces. But the Folsom House needs to be saved. And a lot of times it's us stepping up into these stories and into these situations and making our voice be heard and be known, and saying, yes, this is important, and we need to spend the resources, the time, the money to preserve this. Carter County does not have a local history museum. You've got Sycamore Shoals State Park with Fort Watauga. You've got the Carter Mansion, which is the oldest surviving frame house in the state of Tennessee. You've got Sabine Hill on the other end of Elizabethton, where two Tennessee governors were born. They were brothers, but it does not have a local history museum. And that's a great place to start. It really is. So going back up to comments, good evening, everyone. Alexis, Wes, Adam, hope everybody is doing really, really well out there. Johnny, hope you're doing well. And where was that? Lost it. Springfield, Missouri. I've been to Missouri. Have I been to Springfield? I don't remember. That was a very long time ago. So David Pope with Dr. Gross's 25,000. We need to actually work on that. We just really need to work on that. So if you know of a house that survives for a Confederate officer and a Union officer across the street from each other, drop it in the comments, because I want to continue telling this story. Good evening, Robert. Hope there you are well. Niels, I am sure that Crockett has some family that survived and might have served in the war, but I am not 100% aware of that right now. Elizabeth says I'm getting some answers. I just haven't got to.
Yeah, other folks we're crowdsourcing that one.
Having former Confederate officers and politicians apply directly to President Johnson for a presidential pardon stemmed from his personal vendetta toward the Southern plantation aristocracy, since they had treated him with contempt for having coming from poor, non-slaveholding class. okay, except for the slaveholding part, because Andrew Johnson was a slaveholder. He freed his slaves in 1863. There was a historical marker over there someplace, maybe on the blog, or I may have just had an image. I think there's an image of it in my book, Looking for Kirk Civil War Raids along the Blue Ridge. And Neil's, most 99% of the Confederate soldiers did not have to apply for a presidential pardon. It was only officers above a certain rank. If you owned a certain, if you had, according to the 1860 census, a certain amount of money, or worth a certain amount of money, or if you had served as in a government position role, like mail carrier, you had to apply to the president for a pardon. Folsom is not in any of those categories, but he, as I said, he does state in that letter that he had been indicted for treason, and that is why he was applying. And that's something I don't know if I've ever come across before in my research, is a former Confederate officer. I've come across men being indicted for treason, especially there in East Tennessee, but for them having to apply for a presidential pardon. And since he was pardoned in November of 1865, here's another question for you. Did that remove his indictment for treason? Probably so. Jason Boshears, you are absolutely right. We have lost so much history, Revolutionary War history, local history, historic sites of importance for multiple eras. Look at some of those pictures of all of the bombers and fighters, the B-17s and B-51 Mustangs that were cut up or destroyed at the end of World War II for scrap value. And having worked in museums and historic preservation, I know that it's not at times financially feasible to save everything. I just think too many times we're too quick to come in with a bulldozer. TJ says the Landon Carter Hayes parents' homestead was supposed to be located where the Sycamore Shoals Hospital is today. That's interesting. I don't know if I've ever heard that. So David Pope, that's an interesting thing about how the opposing areas in Knox County, Hardin County, and another county, and the Masonic Cemetery is almost a GAR cemetery. I remember there are cemeteries in Florida, like I think it's Greenwood in Orlando, the old Orlando City Cemetery. I think it's called Greenwood. There are both Confederate veterans sections and Union veterans sections. These are not wartime deaths. They are, I'd probably make another good blog post as well. But they are these two different sections for veterans of different armies. So that's interesting. There's our friend Kirk Fields at the Emerging Civil War Conference. Kirk, I hope things are going well up there. They do a great job at Emerging Civil War. I've got the Robert E. Lee book. I got questions back for that Thursday evening from my editor, Chris Mikowski. So we're going to go on there. Lee, Longstreet, etc. indictments were not squashed until February of 1869. I think there's a book project there. Maybe not for me. My plate seems to be really full right now. And it's interesting, Neil's, they had to apply directly to the president. but they didn't apply directly to the president. They had to go through their governor, and their governor would forward the petition on. I know, if I remember right, Zebulon Baird Vance had applied early on and to Governor Holden to forward to the president, and Holden had it in a file cabinet. And when Jonathan Worth became governor, he found all of these applications in a file cabinet that Holden had been sitting on for months, for years, and he eventually would forward those. Eventually to President Johnson. So that's an interesting thing. I don't know if there's any post out there that really talks about that, maybe, but especially about the treason charges. So that's my story this evening. When the time comes, probably pretty soon, I'm going to lean pretty heavy on y'all to sign that petition. And you might say, well, I don't live in Carter County. I've never been to Carter County. All of our history is important. Whether, it's saving something like a section of a battlefield or from development, or reclaiming a section of battlefield from development. I remember being in Gettysburg last year and walking from my hotel down past the McDonald's toward the field where a lot of July 3rd, 1863 was fought. And there used to be 2 or 3 other restaurants and things past that are now gone. So that battlefield was reclaimed. Or it could be saving a house or putting in a tombstone, since TJ is here, for Landon Carter Haynes. Just that's an important thing. Al, I think that's a great idea. But that is one aspect, one example where people in Carter County need to step up and do that and ask their state representatives to get behind saving the Folsom House. Andrew Johnson is an interesting person. He was a North Carolinian, lived in Tennessee, represented Tennessee as governor in the United States Senate, and I don't know. That's just a ton of them. Wes says, any known Union officers from the Bristol area? That's a fantastic question. Do not know. We'll have to look and see. The Samuel Carter case is like one of a kind when it comes to history. Guy that was both a commissioned officer in the Navy and the Army, volunteer Army at the same time. I, sitting here right this second, don't know of any Union officers from Bristol, but we would have to dig into that and see. Jason Boucher's an excellent question. Presidential pardons, what percentage was approved, generally rubber stamped, approved or denied? I know when I was working on the Branch Lane book, I had a hard time finding James H. Lane's presidential pardon, since he was a Confederate brigadier general. I found his application where he wrote, the governor, I think he was in Virginia at that time, had returned home to Matthews County, Virginia, and but I could never find a pardon date for him. And later on, because Andrew Johnston is getting so many pardons, he rubber stamps the vast majority of them. There are only a few, like Robert E. Lee, who is not pardoned until 100-ish years later. I think it was President, drawing a blank, and it's on the blog. I've written about it.
Is it Ford or Nixon?
I was going to say Eisenhower, but it could be Carter. Somebody look that up real quick. I wrote about that on the blog one time. I don't remember who pardoned Robert E. Lee 100 years later. Drawing a blank. But I don't know. I don't know, Jason. I don't know how many.
It was President Ford.
It was President Ford who, thank you, Miss Elizabeth, for looking that up really quick. Thank you, David Pope. Mental blank right there on my part. But Jason Busher, I do not know. I don't know how many. I mean, that's a great question. That would probably make a good book too. So there's another idea for you this evening. Just come to me for book ideas. The treason cases after the war. And there may be something out there, and there may be something on my shelf out there that you could say, Michael, you own that book and you can't remember. I have a lot of books in this room. A lot of books. So I don't know. I don't have an answer to that one. TJ wants to know, was it Bristol a pretty prominent Confederate area? The Confederacy controlled Bristol for pretty much the entire war. There were Confederate hospitals in Bristol. Was it pretty Confederate? You know, Bud Phillips did some writing on Bristol, but unfortunately he did not include any notes or sources for what he was drawing his information from. So we need to dig a little deeper and uncover some more of those stories and get some good detailed history out about Bristol. Bobby Joe Goodson, about the Henderson rolls for the Cherokee Indian Reservation. I would look at Family Search. I would look at Ancestry. I would look on archive.org. And I would look at those. I've never worked with those very much because a lot of the places where I research in Western North Carolina, there were not any Cherokee here. So that's that story. David Pope, you are correct. There were UCV camps in the Tri-Cities area. Another interesting history project right there. So great conversation so far this evening. If you got another question, drop it in the box and we will see what we can do. Miss Elizabeth's over there looking for a book.
Sorry, unrelated.
Oh, unrelated.
Remember, I need to look for.
Other thoughts or questions out there? Drop them in the box. We'll see what we can do. As I mentioned before, I will be at the Holston Heritage Museum tomorrow afternoon at 5 o'clock. It is a fantastic museum just south of Kingsport. A lot of cool things going on over there. It is great to find people who are passionate about their history. It really is. All right, folks, I'm not seeing any more questions. I am hearing a whole lot of wonderful ideas, research opportunities, upcoming books. Jason, you are absolutely right. When I was talking to Ted Savas the other day about book ideas, I said that was the curse of being ADHD like I am. I do come up with a new book idea every day. And of course, it takes me months and years to research these things out. So there's a lot of ideas out there. Folks, thank you so much for joining me here Sunday nights. Thank you for spending a few minutes with me and listen to me go on about history. And it is fabulous. And West Combs says, or Confederate Hospital, right by where the Bristol sign is now, and 2 Union prisons. Very true. But we need to work on Bristol's history a little bit more. I did several years ago, I did a whole series on Memphis on the blog, and I'm trying to pick which town I'm going to do later this year. We'll just have to see what we come up with. Thank y'all so much for joining me here. Always great on Sunday nights to get together and chat history. Lord willing, we should be around for the next few weeks. And TJ says that the Cherokee rolls are on Native American projects for free. Check it out. Thanks so much. Y'all have a fabulous evening. Continue to research and share that history because there are people out there who are interested. Y'all have a great week. God bless.